First of all, thank you all for attending this IGEL community meetup. We had a great response, but that's to be expected. Anytime Sebastien does anything, you want to come there and in droves, because it's going to be great, as we all well know. So that being said, again, welcome to the February 2021 meetup. Today we're going to talk about some neat stuff. Sebastian's gonna. So what is the agenda? Well, Seb's going to teach us how he does IGEL, and this is something I've sort of wanted to do for a long time, because he told me, what about this idea? And then we haven't done it yet. So a little bit, we've done a little bit to ICG and a Fuse, but now we're getting to it. I'm really excited about it because we have the best guy to do this. So the agenda is real simple: best practices in remote accessing. You're in endpoints, how does Sebastien access logs? How does Sebastien do this, that, and this? So no further ado, let's just keep moving forward. Every time I talk, it's a minute away from him talking. So this one is important. We do have a bunch of meetups coming up. We've actually scheduled these all the way to June, believe it or not. So I'm really looking forward to, of course, this one. We also have a second March one, which will be we'll have two in March, which will be a recap of what we discussed at IGEL Disrupt. So from the technical perspective, we'll have Matthias Haas, our CTO, back on with us for another meetup. And the best part about this is I hope you attend Disrupt, but you'll get to ask him questions about it too. So this is really big, and it's going to be heavy on the Q&A. So I hope you guys join. It's always a hoot to have Matthias on. He's as good as they come. So then we're going to do a deep dive into a secret announcement that we'll be announcing at Disrupt. So we'll tell you after the 25th what that means, but we'll be showcasing and announcing and talking about this new technology that we're going to be announcing. April, we're going to have a Geek Speak with some of our VIPs, some of our IGEL insiders. And I'm really looking forward to this. Lord knows what we're going to do or what we're going to talk about, but we know it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to this one. And then May, thanks to Sebastien, we have our security guy, Matthias Huber, who's a great, great guy. And he's going to be on the line with us, giving a security Q&A. And security is always a very important thing. So really looking forward to that. Of course, the links, if you're not already a member, join. Check out our website, igelcommunity.com. Sign up for future events, igelcommunity.com/events. I know there's a lot of folks on this line, so please sign up for these future events. They're great, great stuff. And if it's not the type of content you want, tell us, right, Sebastien? We want to know this. We want to know what you want, and Sebastien will make it happen. Right, Seb? Exactly. So the last thing I have to say, and Sebastien just reminded me, and I said I have a slide on it, no problem, is please use the Q&A piece of Zoom in order to ask your questions. Do not put the questions in chat. We might not see them. Even if we do see them, we won't remember them. Okay, so if you have a question, use the Q&A piece. I don't know if we'll stop in the middle. We'll probably save questions till the end, just so that Seb has time to get through them. And if there's a lot of questions, maybe he'll write answers and post them in the Slack. Let's see. So with no further ado, Sebastien, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Are you ready to woo us?
I'm almost ready. So let me just check the PowerPoint and let me share that. Hold on a second.
There's one last thing is you're not wearing a tie today. If nobody gets this
I was
joke,
already asked by a colleague of mine why I'm not wearing a tie today, but yeah, I will try my very best for the next time.
Yeah, so yesterday, Sebastien and I had ties on, believe it or not. So you'll find that out soon enough.
Yeah,
I will stop. Sebastien, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for your time and doing this with us.
You're welcome. Just a last check. You are seeing the presentation mode, right? Perfect. Then I will just stop my video just in case, because you don't want to see my ugly face during the presentation mode. So thank you for joining our session of today. I prepared a few things I learned over the last years. I mean, most of the things that I'm doing in the community is kind of reverse engineering. Trying to understand how we are dealing with such kind of subjects. And yeah, we're tweaking a bit around at the end of the session. But before going to the agenda, let's go through the standard introduction. So last time we met, at least in the meetup I moderated, we spoke about the ICG secure hardening stuff. So if you didn't join, or if you didn't knew that we have something like that, just feel free to join. I posted the two linked into the PowerPoint. So if you want to join, we'll be happy to see you there. So agenda for today. My procedure, what do I check and where? It's pretty simple to explain, but we're speaking about session performance. I was thinking about taking over specific use cases. What will I do if a unified communication is not working? But since we have now a really great doc coming from Lars Glöckner, I would not go through that doc because it doesn't make sense at all to make it lively. But I will more explain the approach, why I'm asking specific things inside of our thing. So after that, we will switch quite soon to the hands-on. So how to access the endpoint, even if most of you might already know how to do that. I'm seeing quite often the question, hey, how can I access the endpoint without having to shadowing it? So without doing a remote support. Important directories in the file system for our IGEL OS. Where is what? I mean, I will not go through every directory, but about the most important ones. And then the tweaking part, which will be something that I tried by myself and found, let's say, a few things that I might see helpful for you too. So just a short lesson start from last time. I know that I'm repeating myself, but I tried to cover everything that I got from the last session. So lower my screen resolution, type slower when I'm typing in commands, revert the terminal color to white as a background and black for the typos. So if I did miss something, if you want me to do something, let's say, different than I did before, just write a short note. I would be happy to do that the next time. Some facts, like I'm doing that every time. I was searching on Wikipedia what happened on the 18th of February in the last years. And this topic, let's say, fitted perfectly in what we are doing today. So speaking about WikiLeaks, I guess everyone is knowing what happened and who Assange is and what happened to him, etc., etc. So we'll not go too deep into that topic because it's quite political too. But it brings me to the date of today, of the 18th of February, 2021. And there, I will try to share the secrets of IGEL OS inside of our operating system with you and maybe give you a short introduction about how to deal with requests which are not allowed by our graphical user interface, or just a little bit more handy than we are doing it through our profiles. And hopefully I will not get shot even if I'm seeing a red dot in front of my window, but I hope it's just a child playing with a laser pointer. So, fun fact. It's more or less 5 years ago when we met for our quarterly pre-sales meeting in Reading. It was, I guess, in March or April. So it fits quite perfectly in our timescale today. And fun fact, we already spoke about Citrix performance or in general session performance. You see, it was 2016. Our PowerPoint slides were pretty modern to that time. Yeah. Fun thing, what changed between 2016 and now? In my opinion, nothing, because we are speaking about the same topics again and again and again. And in my opinion, it's even worse, because if I'm switching to the next slide, that's what you already have noticed maybe in your own company, in our Slack channels, in support or whatever, just speaking about unified communication. We have a couple of solutions, and when I say a couple, I mean a lot of solutions we have to cover. We have for every solution a local or a VDI terminal server side. We have a Citrix, a WVD, RDP level, whatever kind of terminal server VDI solution we are speaking about. Most of them are linked to another. So I hope that you get a better overview now. I'm losing it sometimes, even on my side. So just in case, if you feel a little bit lost, we might be lost too, but not maybe with the same overview like you. On that note, I just want to thank you, all the development people in Augsburg who are doing what we are not able to do. So let's say keep an overview about every solution because they have to implement it. So at that moment, just a short thank you, Dankeschön from my side to all the dev people in Augsburg. So that's what I already did 5 years ago, but I changed a little bit the questions I'm asking. You might already have seen in some Slack threads where people from IGEL are answering questions. that we never give one answer to your questions when something is not working. We are giving a lot of them because there is no one issue we are looking at if we are speaking about a performance issue. We have scrolling inside of documents. We have mouse cursor movement. So if the mouse is laggy when you're moving from the left to the right corner, playing videos in general. If the video is played, is the quality fitting or not? Are the keyboard inputs delayed? Because that happens sometimes too, and can be related to some native USB version, but can also be related to some other acceleration methods. The sound itself, coming it through the headphones, speakers, etc. The presentation themselves, when presenting something inside of PowerPoint, or presenting it through Teams, through VDI, through Zoom, sorry. Even that is not just a PowerPoint like we are doing or like we did in the past. It's a PowerPoint inside a terminal server, then also shown through unified communication in specific cases. The video calls, we are almost dealing with that every day in our daily job. All of them? I don't think so. Mostly just a part of them. Next question I'm asking is where? Because we have at the moment custom partitions who can deliver some unified communication or solutions locally. We have the session itself who can hold that kind of content. Then inside of that subdirectories, which kind of application is concerned? Is it a specific unified communication? Is it a web browser? Is it a web browser with a browser content redirection? We speak about Citrix. Are all clients concerned? I was speaking about a, let's say, just IGEL issue. I mean, it's quite obvious, but all that question needs to be asked to get your issue sorted out properly. So now we come to the checks. What I'm trying to check, I mean, like every person in the IT, we have our checklist in our head, sometimes on paper, sometimes in Excel or whatever. And I would just try to, let's say, share some of them with you. So I'm just asking a few things, even before thinking about going through my checklist, because they're pretty important. Which hardware is concerned? Firmware. License. I'm just writing it down here because since on OS 10, we had to deal with the multimedia codec patch, which was not included by default in our operating system. We now have the situation that customers are using the starter license, which is the license you get when you first boot up a device that was just freshly delivered or converted. You can then use the starter license to test our solution. But in that test license, which is called starter license, you have no multimedia codec pack. And that multimedia codec pack is needed, even if it's not technically exactly right, is needed for everything which is related to moving stuff on your window, from scrolling, videos, movies, CAD, so graphical tools, whatever. Just think, if you have a starter license, just rethink about that and maybe ask for a full demo license or workspace edition. Since kernel 5, so 11.04, network negotiation is coming back. Even if it was the last time I dealt with that quite often, it was on OS 10 early versions. The bandwidth. I'm writing down terminal just in between the brackets because who will see, let's say, with a little tool set how to check that from the endpoint. And the MTU size, which is not the main issue, but can be one part of the issue itself. So that's the best overview I can give inside of CUMS, how to check all the components beside a few, bandwidth and MTU size. First thing, check your product. Is it an IGEL device, IGEL UD2, UD3, whatever? Or is it a converted device, booted up by a UD Pocket or converted by the OSC? Check the firmware version. And even if you might not be able to update your whole company devices, please check at least with a UD Pocket if a newer firmware is delivering a better user experience. Because it might, not just because IGEL is doing some weird stuff in our operating system. No, we're integrating new codecs, we're integrating new client components. And as you might know, we're delivering private builds too, where the versions that are not publicly available are also integrating newer components. If you have that feeling, just ask. We'll be happy to help you out and deliver that private build. The network speed, like I said, at the moment, we have a couple of situations where this network speed wasn't properly detected like expected. So not a full duplex, 100 Mbit or 1 gigabit, but sometimes a 10 Mbit half duplex, full duplex, but too slow for what the network card is giving back. And at the bottom of the window, you see the workspace edition maintenance, which means there that you're not using a starter license, but a properly spoken license from IGEL, including the multimedia codec pack, which gives you the whole multimedia user experience you want to expect on your device. Next thing, and it's a question you will see that I'm asking more or less every time that someone is saying that something is not working in a VDI or terminal server solution. Native USB direction. I'm not speaking about only Citrix or only VMware, Horizon, or only RDP. I'm speaking about everything. And I know that I shouldn't do that in a PowerPoint, but please, as soon as you have any kind of performance issues, please try just to be sure to turn it off completely and test again. The reason is a little bit heavy to explain during that session. I will try to keep it simple. You don't want to redirect a device to your terminal server or VDI solution because it is usually not an optimized way. So voice, audio, video devices, USB sticks like mass storage devices, and so on, or printers, sorry, I forgot to mention. Please try to avoid that. There are other ways to deal with that kind of devices. There are virtual channels who deliver, let's say, more or less real-time experience for everything you're dealing with, from video, from audio. It depends a bit from the solution you're using. It depends from the terminal server solution you're using, but they are mostly available. And I mean, it doesn't play such a big role anymore, but it's still present on some solution. We have a VDI plugin, or let's say a plugin in general inside an operating system, like a Cisco JVDI or Teams. And this one in specific needs to correspond to the VDI plugin you are installing on the VDI terminal server side. So just keep that in mind, please. And can you reproduce that issue? Because if you can, that helps us a lot, because sometimes we have the same test environments, the same test areas, where we can try to reproduce this issue for you. And last but not least, in that specific case, the private builds. Private builds are fully supported firmware versions. And I know that we're delivering a lot. So the little hint in between the brackets is exactly what I meant. We are focusing on specific use cases that private, and we might have some, let's say, side dependencies who might not work like expected. But believe me, even if it's just for testing purposes, trust into the private builds to check if the issue you're looking at is gone. And we might, even if I cannot promise it every time, obviously, but on the general available releases like 11.04, 11.05, major releases, we will integrate all that fixes into the major release. That one is not blocking so much issues, but just in case USB access control, it's on the devices, USB access control, you can disable the access to specific device or device classes locally. Honestly, it doesn't happen so much, but just in case, I would check if it's on. And if yes, I would just try to turn it off because it might interfere with some specific devices. I know we are speaking about a thin client sometimes. I know we are speaking about an endpoint. We are speaking about a Linux operating system. But never forget that we have a task manager there. And if a customer or a user is complaining that everything is slow, never forget to have a short look into the local task manager, because, hey, if it's slow, it might be the case that the endpoint is the issue. even if it's coming from IGEL, I mean, we are not perfect. And sometimes we have not enough power to deliver the user experience you're expecting to. But the task manager is giving you a first insight into CPU and RAM usage, which helps a lot in general to have, let's say, general overview. If it's related to the H.264 graphic acceleration, that's another topic, but we will try to cover that maybe in an upcoming session. So we went through all the questions. What happened then? And just pushing all my IDs into the PowerPoint. So I'll not explain what I'm doing because it's already written down. I will just try to show you how or what kind of procedure I'm trying to follow if you are sharing something or you ask me something on the Azure community. And that's the way like the support or pre-sales support are also acting. So it's just spreading around how we are dealing with that kind of issues. And I just want to say in that manner that there is no standard issue, and we have to take the time to reproduce that stuff. So if you can share with us how and at which point a specific issue happened, that helps us a lot. And especially on this logging entries, which we'll try to cover in a few seconds, because now the PowerPoint is almost gone and almost ended. I just want to share that the event view on the terminal server side can also hold some stuff, right? So it's not only the endpoint itself, it's also the event viewer or the terminal server VDI solution too. Before jumping into the command line and the UMS, a last thing before going to the real hands-on. Thanks to our dev people, we have a really great overview about the, let's say, most important debugging directories in the file system. On Linux in general, /varlog is, let's say, the standard place where you would look at logs, sorry. And you could check there which kind of logs you might want to access. It's not covering everything because some are in the journal, some are located in files which are only created when you set a specific debug level, but just to get you a rough overview. Now the directories I tried to sum up a little bit for today. /WFS, that you might already know, is, I would call it this way, one of the couple of read and writable partitions that we have in operating system, which shouldn't be used for holding bigger files. It's really meant for just getting our own configuration files. But if you're speaking about a 1 MB file or a few Ks, it's fine to leave it there. It would stay over the reboot. But just be careful because this directory is really sensitive and contains security-related files. We'll come to that a little bit later on. Same for config sessions. Just keep it in mind. /config sessions is the folder where all the sessions that you configured locally or through the UMS will be held. /user home, a little bit like on Windows or on other Linux distribution, is holding everything that's related to the user. So just to give you a hint, it holds also stuff which is related to your browsers. Then services, which in my opinion holds everything which is related to the client components. Sorry, to the client components. And now, even if the question is not coming such often, and I didn't mention it in my checklist, one thing that you could do by yourself if you want and if you are skilled and if you have enough time to, but it's highly appreciated by everyone at Azure, is to set up a Linux virtual machine, live stick, full-blown machine, whatever, with a similar Linux operating system to ours, just to see if the issue we are looking at is related to Azure, is related to the driver set, to the hardware, to the BIOS, or to the terminal server VDI solution. So I just put it in the green marks the comments I'm using. So mo /etc OS release gives you a first overview about the OS release we are delivering. So Ubuntu 18.04 with WM Control -M, you get the window manager we are using. With LSCPU, the architecture of our operating system. And with UNAM-R, the kernel version. And that gives the operating system you might install to verify the issue. So now let's switch to the lab. I just have to stop my sharing and take over the sharing for the, hold on. To the hypervisor. So just in case, you should see now VMware workstation window. If not, just give me a short note in the chat or Doug can take over, but you should see it. And I prepared a few profiles for today. So we'll just keep it simple. I will not explain everything because I guess you're almost dealing with that kind of issues, but the kind of request. I'm first setting up administrator password, which is also the root password I'm using on the endpoint. I'm activating the SSH access to the endpoint so that I can access it through SSH. So enabling the SSH, permit administrator login, that the root user can log in. And even if it's not necessary anymore, I'm still doing it because it was an issue in the former times. I'm adding the root user to the user access role. Here we go. Then, because you're not able to use SSH every time, because it's not allowed to use SSH, or because you are not able to use or to open the port 22, I'm also activating the secure terminal feature. I will show you a little bit later on how to use it. And last but not least, I'm adding a terminal to the desktop. So in that case, it's really a local command line interface for the endpoint. So here we go. That's my device. Let me add our 4 profiles. Switch back, and the device should now get the configuration. Okay, so let's see. First thing, we used SSH. So just let me copy my IP address, put it into the window. I'm using PuTTY because in that moment I'm using Windows because of the PowerPoint presentation. But you can easily use the SSH client from a Linux machine too, or another SSH client if you prefer. That's fine. Just confirm that the fingerprint is matching. It is usually, but just in case I want to mention it. Log in as root, enter my password, and here we go. Who am I? Would just, even if it's already noted down on the left side, asking for the user I'm using, and we are root, so that's fine. Next thing, because the question is quite often asked in the community, I'm using the secure terminal, which is accessible from the UMS console without the need to install an SSH client separately. In that case, don't use area user or root, use the user. I didn't mention password there, so hold on 1 second. I will just take over that a bit later. But login with the user, I might have already configured a password for the user, so we'll just check that afterwards. And last but not least, accessing the terminal from the endpoint itself. Double-click the local terminal, enter IGEL as password, nothing really secret, and here we go. So that's the easiest way to access the terminal from the endpoint. I will just remove our 4 profiles and just leave the local terminal assigned, because it gives you a little bit more flexibility. And I prepared already a few scripts for that. So just let me jump in. And here we go. So that's our window. Let me just jump in so we can take over the same stuff again. So we have the who am I, which is giving us the right user we are looking at. With the command pwd, I'm just doing a short recap, right? So I know that we have a couple of people who might already know Linux for years. Some may see the command for the first time. So I'm just trying to mix up both worlds. So please, if it's not far enough in the technique, it will come a little bit later. If you find it already too hard, I will try to guide you as best as I can. We'll give you the actual folder where you are in. The command ll is listing all the files inside of a folder. It's the short term of ls minus l, which is available everywhere. ll is not available on every distribution. You can add it if you want, but you will get the same content. I was expecting the same. Okay, so then we have this change directory command, which is cd. So now you can switch to another folder. And if you are in another folder like the WVS, I will just recap the LL. You'll see a couple of items. The magenta, no, not magenta ones, but this violet color, purple color is meaning for a folder, and everything which is black in that case is a file which is accessible. So as soon as we are now in a folder, we can do, like an example, a more, and looking at the file DHC client. And if I don't want to type in everything, I just push the tab button, so tabulator button, and it should auto-complete everything. And with more, I'm looking at the content of the file. In that case, it just gives me a first overview about the IP address, also about the server name of the DHCP server. But it would also give me a first insight if I'm using a DHCP option 224 for the auto registration or 226 for the structure tag. So in case of debugging, that could be a good idea to have a look into that one, because it would give you a first insight about your DHCP option and if you configure it properly. Speaking about the task manager, you have it usually, if not disabled, by a profile under your system tab task manager. And like expected, we have a CPU, we have a memory usage, you can sort here. Or if you're not able to do that by going to the device itself, you can do that through SSH from the command line by opening the command top, which gives you more or less the same overview with the CPU time, the memory usage, etc. If you want to leave that window, just press Ctrl+C to abort it. Then I'm using the command ps iux for giving me every process that is running on the machine. We'll just make the window a little bit bigger. And now we see all the processes running. So we have a couple of things that you might not be able to address. But here we have our XFCE terminal, like an example. So speaking about reverse engineering, when I'm trying to understand what a customer is doing or what I'm doing, I'm opening the terminal and checking by PSAUX if I find the process I'm looking at. And if I don't, because sometimes it's not what I'm expecting, or I don't see everything in one line, I'm using a pipe to add a specific search command inside of that results. And I'm searching here for the line grep which holds terminal. And now I'm seeing exactly the command that is used by my terminal. Just an example, but might have some specific cases. Ifconfig gives you a first overview about your IP address. And if you want, because you want to use it for testing purposes to see if a final network command is working like expected, never forget that you can also use ifconfig to set your network adapter down or up. But in that case, if you're doing that through SSH, never forget that if it's down, it will not come up again until you reboot the device. But if it's down, the user have to reset the device because you're not able to access it anymore. In my case, it's fine since it's a virtual machine, and I can reactivate the network adapter directly from the command line. So using a find a network command would fit perfectly here. And that's how I'm dealing with it. The alternative would be to restart the whole network manager, which do that, but a few things more. Honestly, I wouldn't explain something I'm not sure about. So in that case, I'm knowing that the task manager, the network manager is restarting, if I remember right, every network interface, and if config, just restart the specific ones you mentioned. But let me double check that one. I'm not sure at the moment. So here we go. Every adapter is up and online. You remember I already spoke a little bit about how to check your bandwidth. I mean, there was a lot of really cool GUI tools that you could use in general if you would use a standard Ubuntu client. But in our case, we're a little bit limited. So I'm mostly using the command wget and a command which will put our download into def null. That means that the files that I'm trying to download here, which is coming from a speed tester, isn't stored into the file system and would not break my my installation. So if I put that one and I put the enter, I see now how fast my internet connectivity is. I mean, it's not the best way to test your speed, but it's quite helpful to see if you have fluctuations, if it's pretty stable or not, etc. So that's just a comment I would like to share with you afterwards. Let me assign first, before explaining what I'm doing, a browser session to the endpoint. Here we go. We should be ready in a second. Yeah, here we go. I have a browser session. Python is, hope that I pronounce it right, is a pretty helpful tool, especially if you don't want to open a specific client like a WinSCP or whatever, or you don't want to deal with the command line more than you need. Go to the directory you want to present and issue that command. Be careful for one simple reason. You're opening, I would call it a simple HTTP server, so a simple web server on your endpoint. Just do that really as a last resort if you are really sure about what you are doing, because basically it can also be used for other stuff, which is not such helpful if you speak about security. But if you would like to access specific files from your personal computer, which is outside of your LAN, you can just put the IP address of the endpoint, the port 8080, and you see now the content of your WFS folder. And that can be helpful if you want to check specific files, or if you want to download specific files which are already there. Or if you don't want to use the command line because you forgot how to change the directory, which might happen. So you could also put that one as that command as a custom command if needed. But like I said, please be careful with that. So just remember, you can open a simple and smart web server where we can now access the files on your endpoint if you don't do that from an IGEL endpoint, because there the downloads are blocked. But you can do that from your own personal computer and that will work. So that's just a short side note. Let me close that command by pressing Ctrl+C again. So I'm closing the web service. And now I'm looking at the logs. So as soon as I went through all the files that I wanted to look at, one of the first things I'm looking is journal.ctl, which is I would call it more or less the event viewer of your endpoint. And with -F, you keep it actualized, so refreshed every time you're doing something. So for the moment, not so much is happening. But if I open the task manager, or let's say, sorry, a session, which might fit better in that case, and something would happen with an error or whatever, it would be shown there. Since I don't have an error, I will just put johnctl -F and get, let's say, more general content about what happened. Right, so if I close now my session again, you will see in real time what happened on the endpoint. And might also give you a first insight about a behavior that you're looking at, about an issue that might happen, or maybe sometimes a config file that is touched by the process you're looking at. So that's the way, from the first approach, I would look at specific errors. But from our perspective, since we are not knowing exactly what happened, I would rather try to understand how IGEL is working. So we already know that we are not a standard operating system. We are secure. We don't keep persistent changes in the operating system. So I have to understand how our sessions are defined. For that, we have our desktop, which is quite obvious in that case, and we have icons and shortcuts on the desktop. So in that case, I will just share with you, it's user home and the folder desktop. With LL, I will get an overview about the shortcuts which are defined on the desktop. And I'm not sure what happens where. So I first start with more or cut to see the content of a specific file. In that case, I would like to see how my Xterm is working. So the terminal window we are looking at the moment. Okay, it's not such interesting information there, but I'm seeing that the execution path is Xterm null. That is, let's say, helpful for me, not such helpful for you. But if you go there in the folder config sessions, we see now, what a coincidence, an Xterm null session and a couple of others. But let's say on the Xterm null. And that's exactly the session that you created by a profile or locally. So if you now go into more Xterm null, we are seeing which command is used by IGEL to execute that session. And remember, when I issued the ps-iux command with grep terminal, I saw a if xfce4 terminal command, right? And that's what I'm seeing here, with some additional parameters that we are adding to the equation. But in that case, that doesn't play a big role for the local terminal. Now let's switch back to the user home desktop to look into the Citrix session, which might be more interesting for the audience. Sorry, here we go. We see again, the execution path is pn login null. And like you remember from the config session, like I said, it's the folder, the partition where your sessions are created. We have a pn login null session created here. So let's look into it more deeply. Now we see a little bit more, which is good because it's a little bit more complex than a terminal session. We see that a couple of libraries are loaded. Okay, that's interesting. More or less interesting, let's say. And we see that pn login is used for the login process. Here we go, this user bin pn login. That's a standard path, more or less, for the Citrix Workspace app login. So now with the comment where is pn login, I'm checking where this binary is located. Interesting fact, okay, it's in user bin, it's already mentioned there, but sometimes it's not the full path you are seeing, but just a binary. So now we have our execution path for the binary itself. So when speaking about the rhythm engineering, that's where I would look at and check now what I have there. So let's check for pn login. And I see a symbol which is showing to the right side in a specific other folder. That means that this file is coming from a symbolic link. So if I want to see really the real binary, I have to switch now to the folder or to the partition /services, ICA bin for binary. I hope you can follow my thoughts. I know it's a little bit weird and complicated sometimes, but now I'm getting a little bit closer to the original binary. Here we go. pn login minus config, _config, and some other Linux Citrix binaries, like the ICA connection center, which is or went a little bit broken in some versions. At least from my side, it's working from this operating system level. So now I can access all the binaries related to the Citrix stuff. So I would like to switch back for a second to the PowerPoint and show you a use case that we covered in the community. Inga was asking if it's possible to configure or to customize login screen from the self-service Workspace app client. Not from the GUI, not from a profile perspective. Neither from the self-service configuration itself. So reverse engineer on my side goes exactly where we went through. So I'm just checking which process are concerned. I'm seeing here a self-service, okay, that's fine. But I'm every time mostly looking how is the session configured. So we have a self-service null already created by a profile. And I'm seeing there a couple of, oops, sorry, I have to switch to the right presentation mode to the VMware. So you should see now the device again. And I went to the command more config session self-service null. And I'm seeing now the content of all the process. And I'm trying to read the script as best as I can. So I'm trying to get the folders or the configuration files that are touched by this content. But I'm seeing that, honestly, I cannot really rely on something specific, and I'm not even sure if what I'm searching for is included there. So if I'm not sure where to look at, I'm just going to my services folder and just issuing a grep, which is searching for a specific string for what Inga wanted to adapt, which will now search all the files, the content of the files of the subdirectories in the specific ICA subdirectory, and will search for every content matching that pattern. So we have a binary file, okay, but hey, that's great. I am seeing now that a specific file called, here we go. Yeah, we have a file containing that that pattern, this strings.js file. And since we're working with the standard and with the latest version of the Citrix Workspace app, I'm just looking at this file. So let me check. I'm copying it here. And I will open a command line editor, which is called VI, to check the content of the file and if wanted to add something to it or to change something. So now we are really looking at the content of the file, and I'm seeing now the content of the login button of the welcome text. So I'm just changing it inside of the editor. You could use a notepad, obviously, but in my case, I'm using the VI. And I'm just changing a small thing. So the login button should now show, instead of sign in, not sign in. Let me check if I already assigned the self-service session, but I don't think so. So let me just jump in and let me assign a standard dummy session. Here we go. Did I? Maybe I wanted to have it prepared. My mistake. So hold on, just let me create a shortcut on the desktop. It's already there, just a shortcut which is not created, just a dummy one. So I'm not expecting any kind of Citrix connectivity behind. But now, as soon as I press and open the self-service, oh wow, my button is now showing not sign in, which is obviously not a Citrix standard behavior, but that's cool. So that's pretty neat. But just remember that we can do that every time, because if you change it now in the file system, it will be gone after the reboot. So if I want to change something, we have to use the command called SED. So I prepared a standard command that I will share with you afterwards, where I'm replacing a specific pattern by something else, like SED is awesome. And now I should have replaced my welcome message by something else. So for the Germans, the SED is something which is quite historic in Germany, but that's not what I'm looking at. I'm really looking at the command SED. So just in case, if you want to tweak a little bit around, that's exactly how I would do it. And as soon as you have your SED command working like here, that means that this command can be issued on every boot up. Obviously, even if you do that with an SED, it will be gone after a reboot. But if you want to do that persistent, I would just copy that command and put that in a profile into System, Firmware Customization, Custom Commands, Network, find a network command. So on every boot up and every time where the device have a network change, it will issue that command and change the pattern you defined. So the welcome to Citrix Workspace by the command after the slash, whatever it might be. In my case, it was just a short, let's say, joke, but you can replace it by everything you want. So if you put that as a find a network command, I will just do a reboot of the device just to see that even if I reboot the device, it will be there. So that was one use case. Just in the meantime, while the device reboot, I will re-switch into the PowerPoint mode and show you the other proposal prepared. Peter was asking why when I push a user reboot, so if I reboot the device, there is no timeout. So this countdown which is happening from 10, 9, 8 seconds, but it just opens a window which stays there. If you do that on a shutdown, you have a countdown. The countdown you have defined in your profile for every configuration change, which is usually 20 seconds. And that's true, it isn't working. Because as soon as you reboot a device, let's see if it's there. So let me switch back to the VMware window. If I push now a reboot or restart on the endpoint, we have a window, but no countdown, right? So I have about 2 minutes left. I will try to cover it as best I can in this short period. I checked since I don't know which restart is meant here, or which command is used, we have under accessories, commands, the ability to put a reboot terminal command on the desktop, which helps me then, let's say as a first insight, to understand where it might be located. Here we go. Yeah, we have a comments shortcut. So let me check what is meant there. Oh, there is again a session which is called comments null created somewhere. What we learned, it's not somewhere, it's on the config sessions. And we should now see again comments null. Great. So that checks comment null, the content of the file itself. We see now a couple of interesting stuff, not such interesting to be honest, but we see that, that's how I went through, we have a sub process which is called soft reboot. Okay, so same stuff again. Where is soft reboot? Okay, nothing. Here we go, sbin soft reboot. And now checking again, is this file a subscript or is it really a binary? No, it's again a script. Okay, interesting. Okay, and to make it short, I just went through the script and I saw that reboot timeout variable is there. And funny fact, this one can be set to yes, but no chance to do that in a profile. So one thing I was thinking, and I might have been totally wrong, but it worked. I just went into the script, so the soft reboot script. I checked if the variable is set somewhere. It isn't. So I created one just for testing purposes. So reboot timeout equals yes. Okay, looks good. Let me write and quit the file. Let me restart my endpoint. Oh, wow, here we go. We have our countdown. So honestly, I didn't made a ticket for that. I'm not sure if it's a bug or if it's on purpose, but just in case, I just wanted to show you how I'm going through that process of reverse engineering. I have a couple of other topics left because I wasn't sure how much time it would take. And I would say, just to keep everything in time, I would now stop the sharing and check if there are questions we need to cover. And if not, I will put that into the next session.
Sebastien, that was great. You lost me somewhere after about minute 2, but it was really, really, really great. I think some of the comments in the chat were really, really positive too. So we do have a couple questions, but yeah, not many. Okay. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to answer them. And of course, if you need to drop, please do. But we'll stick around and answer a few questions. So Rando asks, I know it's an early question. He asked this way early on. But is there a document on log files for IGEL OS? And then he continues, basically a very deep doc on the log files and the contents of them. Do we have anything like that?
Yes, we have something like that. Yes. Randall, I would suggest that I would forward you, just for, let's say, for your eyes only, in the first step, a document that some colleagues of us from the development created, and see if it meets your expectation. And if yes, I would ask then if our colleague from devs would mind if I would take up that document and share it, let's say, a little bit more widely. But I would take over that task, definitely.
Perfect. Perfect. The next one doesn't have a lot of context. It was early on, about 5:30 for our time, I guess, the 30 minutes after. But you mean like setting up a Debian or so? Would you remember?
Yes, exactly. I would in general suggest to, if you can, to set up a Ubuntu 18.04 at the moment with x64 architecture. And that would with XFCE window manager, XFCE4, which is the window manager we are using. And that would be the easiest way to reproduce an issue. Good point, because it was on the last page of my presentation. Let me just push one last slide, if you wouldn't mind. I know we're a little bit over time, but Carl and Falk were asking for it in the chat, and they are absolutely right. We have the command collection, which is a cheat sheet created by a former IGEL employee, then took over into an Excel file, then into a PDF, and now on GitHub. This command collection is covering a lot of commands, not only Linux commands, but also IGEL commands. So if you want to check it out, I just posted the link in the presentation, and I will share it also afterwards with the links I sent over in the presentation. So you will definitely get it and check up everything. Most of the comments I showed today are also there because we put it into the document in the original ones, and Falk and some other people were so kind to refresh it.
Perfect, perfect. Any other questions? You do such a good job. You leave them sort of speechless, my friend.
Yeah, just maybe asleep. Let's see.
No. I told you, I keep telling you this. They don't go to sleep.
Okay.
So I think that's it. As always, if you have any questions for Sebastien, if you have any questions in general, the best place is the IGEL community. So if you're not an IGEL community, this is the type of stuff we do, and within our meetups and also within the community itself. So please join us, join.igelcommunity.com. Sebastien, if you look through some of the chat, thanks so much. Really great content. So thank you very much, Sebastien, for taking the time to do this and all the prep work that goes into this. Doing events like this is very task oriented for the guys. So I have the best job. I do a little intro and I ramble at the end. So yeah, what do I say? But thank you so much for doing this, and thanks to everyone for joining the IGEL community too, or this meetup. And we have another one coming up soon, and then more. So also, as Sebastien always likes to say, well, if there's things you want, let us know, right?
Absolutely. We are here to help. And if you have questions regarding the content, I'm still there in Slack for the next couple of hours. So just feel free to ask. I will be happy to help. Perfect. Just in case, I will just share the next thing I will do, or I will try to put into the next session. You might already have asked for how to tweak with the graphical user interface with the XFCE itself. I mean, I don't want to do too much stuff there because it isn't properly supported, but you might already have asked, hey, why can I not group icons? Or why can I just remove the titles of the icon in the taskbar? There's everything that you can do in an XFCE4 configuration method. Stay tuned. I will share that on the next session.
Perfect. We'll have to make a follow-up. So I'll work with you to make that happen.
Tomorrow?
I love it.
No, just kidding.
Not tomorrow. Yeah, so definitely check out our future events, and don't forget Disrupt next week. That'll be a lot of fun too. So we have some cool announcements. One, the top secret one that we're going to be doing the meetup on, and then the Pi will be announced next week. The IGEL OS for ARM operating system, which we're really excited about. And here's my Pi right here, in fact. So I'm quite looking forward to that. Sebastien, any last words before we call this quits?
No, I would just thank you for all that stayed until the end, and sorry for being a little bit over the time, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, that's the kind of session I'm loving, and I hope that I can transport a little bit of that passion to you. If not, please join next time. I will try to do that with even more passion.
You're half French, so you have a lot of passion built in, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, guys. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Tschüss.
Tschüss.